Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Plant Problems. This is your host, Tony Frischknecht. Thank you so much for joining me today. It is awesome to be here with you guys. I really enjoy bringing some interesting things to you to view and some stuff I think is quality. I've got a great guest today. Before I go into that, I would like to dig into the fact that it is springtime right now here in Colorado. And given all that has happened, there still needs to be some growing that takes place here in the start of the season in all agriculture. And one of the big ones, of course, is hemp. Hemp is changing quickly as cannabis is. It's a few years behind, although there's quite a bit of action happening in the field because these farmers are taking large acreages and flipping from what they had before, maybe such as corn or wheat or something else, and they're going big into hemp. Last year, it was extremely exciting because we had passed the Farm Bill for 2018. Trump actually signed that in and made hemp completely legal, which is incredible. I think us here in the cannabis world will see we'll see a lot of excitement coming to that. Once we get legalization, it'll change so much. But back to hemp. So with hemp coming on board and people treating it as a real legitimate business, especially the farmers, the most important side of the process is the farmer actually taking it seriously. And last year, thousands of farmers jumped on the bandwagon of legalization of hemp. However, there are some major gaps. I've spoken about this before, but the processing is a huge one. Another thing is equipment, and finding the right equipment to do your farming, I think, is extremely challenging because there are not a lot of people producing commercial size equipment. And I think it's extremely important, not only for saving you time, saving you money, saving you labor, all these things that cost the farmer hundreds of thousands of dollars every season. Being able to eliminate and streamline that is huge to the bottom line. It makes it profitable. It allows the farmer to reinvest next summer for his next crop. I know there was a lot of guys that struggled out in the industry this year. Some first-timers took it on the chin. Some are still sitting on their crop right now. But they've already spent that money to get that processing done. This is why I have my next guest on. I'm super excited to have him here today. He is building the industrial side of the hemp processing, which is so exciting. I've got Reid Vander Veen here with me from Hemp Processing Solutions. Reid, thanks for being on today. How are you doing?
Excited to be here and chat with you again, Anthony.
So you guys have been building some amazing industrial style type products. And I talked to my audience about building of new companies and the creation of them and the work that's put into it. And I know you've got a few years into this, but you also have another side of your company that has a lot of similarities. You guys deal with a lot of brewing as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah. We do a lot of basically anything that's reducing material down or reducing particle size of different products. So one of the technologies that you see in our BioMaster product, which is a machine that breaks down the hemp plant, there's some grinding technology in there that we also use in more of a traditional ag setting. So food and beverage industry, ag, livestock grinding, grain for animal feed, that type of thing, grinding malt and barley for the brewing industry, the craft brewing and craft distilling industry. So we've got our hands in a couple different things, brewing, ag, ethanol, hemp, a number of different things for sure.
Well, I know I started the reason why I went into that, I didn't really let you kind of share your story a little bit, but everybody's shifting right now. So it's super exciting, right? People are moving along and things are happening quickly. And a lot of companies, like I've talked to several companies that are making hand sanitizer now, right?
Sure.
People are shifting to pay the bills, stay alive, and move forward. And I see this in our industry so much, in cannabis and hemp so much, because we have to bob and weave to survive. I mean, that's really where the strength comes from. And before I get too far into your products and stuff, I want to give you an opportunity for people to kind of understand, a little bit about you and your background over the last couple of years. So would you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. So we are a company called Hemp Processing Solutions. We're based out of the middle of everywhere, the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, which is an interesting space or an interesting state to be in the hemp space for sure. Kind of have the claim of being, if not the last, one of the last states to, set up legislation that allows for the growing and processing of the cannabis plant. So that's certainly been a challenge for us. We've had to navigate that when we've gotten creative with a bunch of different things to make that happen. But yeah, we've been making agricultural equipment, industrial agricultural equipment for over 30 years. Like I said, we spent a lot of time in the traditional ag space, which wouldn't be a shock to anybody that knows anything about South Dakota. We have cattle and we have cornfields, and that's basically what we got. We got a couple other things. That's what you see over here. So we know a thing or two when it comes down to like particle size reduction, when it comes to grinding equipment and making very industrial scale, commercial farm grade equipment. We are very accustomed to understanding that and the rigors and demands that go into developing a product that can stand up to abuse year after year after year. The way, farmers use it, the way guys that depend on this stuff for their livelihood depend on equipment. And that's what we're proud to make. So we've got a couple different machines that are specifically set up for the hemp processing industry. We've got one called the BudRubber. We've got one called the BioMaster. Both do essentially the same thing in terms of breaking down the plant, separating the fibrous material from the flower material, but different processes, and choosing those machines is largely dictated on what your harvesting technique is. So if you have maybe a whole plant that you're harvesting, you're field drying or you're hang drying, something like that, you're gonna hopefully use the BudRubber to break that material down. If you're doing more of a chopped or a combined type of harvesting process, you're gonna use the BioMaster, which has different type of technology, but essentially the same basic premise. We're separating the fiber and flower material out. So we got into the hemp space probably been close to 2 years ago when we first started dabbling. We got pulled in, I guess, if you want the origin story, we got pulled in. Essentially, we followed one of our strategic partners in the ag space who said, hey, we're going to go try this hemp thing. We've got some processes, some technology, some hardware and software that we think is going to work really well for the hemp space. Are you willing to help us out? We need some sort of a way to break down this plant material.
It seems you had the willing and ability, but kind of got led there by somebody else because it was a little unknown to you. Is that correct?
Definitely. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. It was a big discovery. It was, we've got we're a small business, we've got 30, 40 employees, but we're just a bunch of curious people. We like to figure out what's next. We like to tinker. We have a full-time in-house R&D staff that's constantly working on stuff, which is pretty impressive for an organization, I think, of our size, when you've got multiple employees dedicated full-time to research and development and innovation. So, that's our nature. We're just curious. We've got great partners. So when they said, hey, here's an opportunity, we took a look at the market like everybody else did and said, man, this hemp thing is... we're on the front end of this right now. There's likely an opportunity to be had. Let's figure out what our play is and see if we can get involved somehow and help contribute. So that's how we got our start. And that first machine was the BioMaster. It was an early version anyway, a prototype version. But yeah, that led to that BioMaster machine that I referenced a bit ago.
So creating a prototype for something like this in an industrial style, when you go into creating something industrial, you mentioned before, you got to make something that people depend on, something that, is just going to go through the long haul and the rigorous beatings that farm equipment have to take. When you look at some of the other products that are out in the industry right now, there's not a lot of them, but when you look at them, do you think that they are building an industrial mindset?
That's a good question. I think that somewhat depends on the scale of the user, right? I mean, you could consider an industrial scale, potentially to have 3 or 4 of these little, maybe like a trommel. Like if you got multiple lines and you've got a handful of people that can do that versus a manual hand separation process, that those 3 or 4 little machines are probably going to feel, life-changing to an organization like that. From a mass production standpoint, when we get this industry caught up to where we think it needs to go and where we see it going, we are going to need equipment that isn't terribly far off from what the other more traditional ag side uses. It's heavy equipment that can take temperatures and take weather and take massive amounts of throughput in a mostly automated fashion where there's not a lot of manual processes involved. And, that's what we're shooting for. Out of the gate, we said, that's our space. We know industrial, we know farming, we know big scale farming. So it was a new space, but it was a somewhat natural, organic shift to say, how can we apply our experience and our technology and our capabilities, our production staff, that type of thing, and our engineering team, all that. How can we apply this into a new space? So,
well, of course, the reason I have you on here is because of the BudRubber and the BioMaster, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I do want to, point out the fact that it sounds like from what you were saying before is you feel like we have a long ways to go in the designing and building some of these processing machines. Is that correct?
Well, I think so. What's fun about this industry is it's the great thing and the not so awesome thing at the same time is that there's not a library of knowledge out there yet. I mean, they're at least not on a massive scale, right? We've got some individual data points. We've got a couple growing seasons. Most states, most regions have maybe 1 or 2 growing seasons under their belt. There's a handful of guys that everybody knows that this guy figured out some process or had some technology that worked. He could do it. He figured it out. We got to figure out how to mimic that, how to duplicate that. There are other states like ours that we're just getting started. We're working on passing legislation right now. I spent probably too much time in our state capitol chatting with the legislators there. We did get legislation passed, but we now have to get it implemented. And in light of the whole COVID-19 stuff, there's been a slow roll of that. We just set up the South Dakota Industrial Hemp Association 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So we had our first board meeting for that last week, which is exciting. We're working on developing that program. But I mean, we're by and large, we're pretty well, we're in the early stages of bringing this industry back to life, right? We have to remember that this isn't entirely new.
Exactly.
And
people think it is though, right? They think it's new.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it is new. And for all of, obviously we weren't alive probably when hemp was being grown actively in our country, but there are a lot of people that were and can remember that. I have a couple good friends that said, oh yeah, my grandpa or my dad has talked about, when they made some of these laws and made this stuff illegal. And, so we're bringing it back to life. We're trying to do so in a modern way. And today's world, things move fast. Once somebody figures out how to produce it, it's just going to require scale. It's going to require massive scale to do it well. And on top of all of that, just normal, how fast and how crazy things are, we can't lose sight of the fact that the product we're producing, the plant that we're growing, has more documented uses than any other plant on our planet. So whether it's going into a consumable of some sort, soaps and lotions and shampoos or something you eat, whether it's going into pet supplies, pet foods, whether it's going into paper products. I don't need to educate your audience on that.
Yeah. How do you see it changing our world over the next 5 years, I'll say?
Oh, man, you could make a prediction about that. And it's a good question. My prediction is you're going to start to see a lot more of the building materials are going to take off. I think the fibrous side of the plant that at least up until recently has kind of been almost considered a byproduct and still is in some ways, some areas, is going to really take off. And the cannabinoids, the CBD, CBN, CBGs of the world, they're still going to be present. I think they're only going to grow. That's my prediction. It's just one guy's opinion, but I think we're going to see 2 significant things happen. If you want me to really get down to brass tacks on a prediction, here's where I would go. I would say CBD and those types of oils are going to become like ibuprofen and aspirin. Everybody's going to have it. It's going to be in their medicine cabinets. It's going to be easy to obtain because the research is going to come around. It's going to follow. There's some early stuff that we're seeing, right, where this is showing a lot of really promising results. I think it's going to be like Advil. It's going to be like ibuprofen. Everybody's going to have some form of CBD in their house to treat a various array of ailments. I think on the industrial side, you're going to start to see a ton of this stuff going into car products, a ton of this stuff going into building materials. It'll be interesting to see what happens in animals. Again, I'm putting my ag hat on, but in terms of food, in terms of bedding, I've talked to some cattle farmers recently that are just really interested in terms of, hey, can I feed this thing? Can I bale this stuff and dry it out and pellet it? Can I feed it to my cattle? From a habitat standpoint, wildlife, people don't talk about this very often. If agriculture is the primary driver of the South Dakota, our state, South Dakota economy, then hunting is second, 100% hands down. Like,
absolutely.
October, November, September, that time frame, all you see is bright orange and camouflage. Our state bird is the ringneck pheasant. And what's ironic about that,
but you guys have some amazing pheasant hunting there, but
oh, it's awesome. It's incredible. It's so funny because not only do we allow you to shoot the state bird in South Dakota, we actually do so. Like, come here and shoot our state bird.
Yeah, which you can't do in any state. I don't know any state.
Very few. But you think about from a habitat standpoint, just what growing hemp can do. It's not only cover, but it's also a food source for these birds that we rely on so tremendously for our economy. It's baffling that we're not doing more with this right now, that there aren't more advocacy groups pushing for it. You start laying out some of these facts and it's just kind of like a forehead slap moment. It's like, what in the world? What are we doing?
The number of farmers I talked to over the last couple seasons that have grown this in their fields here in eastern Colorado, they said they'll do either private hunting or they go, it's incredible the amount of food that is left for these birds to come in. And he goes, my hunting has been just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's going to change our world, especially with all the products that we're looking at. Oil issues that are happening right now with depression of the barrel prices because nobody's using oil, which is going to amount to some interesting stuff over the next 6 months. But the hemp product can take all kinds of shapes for even automobiles and all the plastic around them that can be used in it. I'm right there with you. It's a great time to be in, especially when you're in a place of we're going to build some industrial stuff to help out the farmer. And the farmer has a hard enough time as it is when it comes down to just simply growing the product at the start and harvesting it. So the guys that have been out there, like let's say last season that have done this, you've had a couple of them start take advantage of your product. What are you seeing coming into this next year? Are people awakening that, that their labor costs were extremely high last year because they didn't have the right products? Or are people still in just like, we just got to get this planted and we'll figure out the rest in 6 months, right?
Yeah. So last year, we definitely saw a lot of the latter. We definitely saw a ton of people who were in a rush to get seeds in the ground and kind of were hoping that the commercialization of the industry, the processing side, would materialize over the course of the summer, over the course of the growing season. And I mean, frankly, it just didn't happen. There were some folks that started developing some harvesting technology, some folks like ourselves that started developing that upstream or pre-processing equipment. There are facilities either going up or being retrofitted to do the downstream processing. But there was such a glut, I think, on the amount of material, plant biomass being produced, combined with a small amount of processors who not only were accepting it, but knew what they were doing with it. And then also knew that because how much access they had and how much people were hurting, that they were being able to be super picky and super choosy. And they didn't have to worry about paying a premium for this product because they could get it from somebody else down the street for cheaper. So there's a lot of different things kind of in the works.
How many people are out of business? What's the percentage you think of farmers that are already out of business on hemp from just last season?
I would hesitate to even make a wager. I've heard of a number of people that we've talked to that tried it last year they're just refusing to go to do it again because, they were they had an early frost or something like many of the Western states did. And they said, I wasn't prepared. I'm not capable. We don't have the system, the infrastructure, there locally on their farm or in their region to handle it. There's a number of those people. There's a number of folks, we've all heard the horror stories about people that just leverage themselves or their farm or their family too much without a great kind of harvest and post-harvest plan. So I think we're seeing anyway, a lot more hesitancy to kind of cowboy into it this year, that it's, hey, there's a legitimate.
I like that term, cowboy into it.
Yeah. Well, I think folks are realizing that there is real money to be made here, but that the industry is in the plant and everything about it is just so vastly different from the other commodities that we're typically growing, fruits and nuts, traditional ag with like corn and soybean and wheat. The plant is different, processing is different, their equipment required is different. So what we're seeing is a lot of guys, there's still an appetite. We're having a lot of conversations with people that are getting into it that want to kind of start, which is still exciting to see. But I think everybody's eyes have been opened over the course of the last 6 to 8 months to say, all right, we got to have a more comprehensive plan in place. Before we put seeds in the ground, we're going to have purchase contracts. We're going to try and figure out some options for insurance. We're going to see how we can work as a co-op or a collective with some other local farmers to offload some of the costs of this equipment that we're going to need to use. Or we're going to try and find facilities that we can rely on and put some equipment in, or store some plants in, or what have you.
It's amazing to me that these farmers coming from, they grow annually. I mean, I'm sure there was some that did well, but a lot of them just learned some hard lessons because they're not familiar with this crop, right?
Right.
So it would seem that they would know, okay, well, I know this is going to be a completely different thing. Why would I bet the farm? And hitting the home run, everybody wants that, right? Everybody wants to knock it out of the park the first time. It's been my experience that it takes, a handful of harvests to really understand your processes all the way through. People think they can do one season, pay for all their bills, have some money in hand, and be ready for next year. And I guess I get confused why that's not more understood.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be outliers in everything, like business, like life, like entrepreneurship, like farming, like people, right? There's outliers regardless where you're going to look at. There's those people. There's a couple stories. We've heard plenty of them. Our customers, are fortunate to be a few of where there's just like baffling, unbelievable, successes.
What's the best one you heard this from last year?
Oh, we had a customer that dealt with some unfortunate weather. Their plants didn't turn out the way they were hoping. They didn't grow quite to the size that they were hoping, but rather than harvest them and extract the oils out of the plants like they were planning, they found a buyer there right locally that wanted to purchase the plants and use them for smokable. So the farmer sold the plants as they stood in the ground, unharvested, for gobs of unbelievable amounts of money, to the point where they were making, it's like, I hesitate to even throw out figures because somebody's going to quote it, somebody's going to reference it, but they were making a lot of money.
It's last spring. It's interesting you bring that out. I was at a conference down in New Orleans, and I actually smoked my first hemp cigarette. Of course, there's no THC in it. It was just hemp.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel funny that we still have to give that disclaimer, though? Like,
I know.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It is what it is. And, it tasted very similar to tobacco. I'm not really, I smoke cigars, but I don't smoke like cigarettes.
Yeah.
You didn't have that harshness that you get from cigarettes. It was incredible. And so it makes a lot of sense to me. This is a great entrepreneurial lesson, is you see those guys that are out there that are like, well, what am I going to do? They're not getting to that size. They meet somebody in network, and all of a sudden he doesn't even have to touch the plants. It's like, just come get them and do whatever you want with them. I mean, talk about a big win. Jeez.
It was jaw-dropping what they had. The types of figures that even those of us here in the Midwest that, are around some pretty sizable farming operation once in a while, it's just like the amount of money they were making on like a per acre basis compared to what it takes us to make money on like corn or soybeans or wheat or something. It's like, there's good reason why when you talk about that stuff that some people are like, well, we got to do that.
Yeah, this is what draws everybody in.
Is even a remote possibility, even if I get half of that lucky, right? And it's like, that's such an outlier to be that fortunate to be the right place, the right time. The fact of the matter is, the vast majority of the rest of us still have to figure out a way to get the stuff in the ground, get the right climate for the right seed variety, figure out a way to whole plant basis, or if we're going to combine it, we're going to chop it somehow. We have to cool it. We have to dry it. We have to start the separation process. We got to find an extractor if we're going that route, or, we got to find a fiber buyer, and there's not a ton of those. Like, there's a lot of steps in here that guys got to figure out. And I think that's what caught a lot of people off guard.
Yeah. People were expecting, okay, well, I just got to grow it and then I'll sell it from there, and then they can deal with it after that. And I think the big hole is the processing, which I love having you on because of this. You guys, you have the BudRubber and the BioMaster are your products that you have right now. Those two products are breaking apart the plant, separating it piece by piece. Do these two products work together, or are they two different products?
Yeah, so good question. And the answer is like all good answers, it depends, or it's both. We have customers that will use just one. We've got multiple customers that are using just one or the other machine. We have a few customers that are actually using them in tandem. We have them set up in tandem at a facility there in Colorado. And they are actually, even though they're bringing in combined material, chopped material, they're actually running it through the BudRubber beforehand. The BudRubber, for those that don't know, is designed for whole hemp, whole plant processing. They're running chopped material through that because the separation is, the mechanism for that is so effective that they're actually able to pull out 75 to 80% of the fiber material in that first pass through the BudRubber. And that thing can do, massive amounts. We're talking tune of, up to 5,000 pounds an hour. We've had customers that have done twice that even, but, we rate the machine at, like 2,000 to 5,000 pounds an hour pretty safely, especially with that chopped material. It wasn't designed for that, but the separation process is such that it works so effectively that we're pulling off that much fiber material. And then they're taking all of that floury biomass that still has a little bit of fiber in it, and they're running that through the BioMaster.
So how much of the plant are you able to use after running it through this process? Like, are we talking 90, 100% of the plant you're able to separate out for different products?
Yeah, most of the plant is usable. It just depends a little bit on the machine configuration, the plant variety, the condition of the plant going in. How dry is it? Is it super dry and brittle? Is it super wet and kind of, floppy and flexible like this plant can be sometimes? So you have to adjust the machine, your speeds and your contact rates and different things like that. But really, the process takes the entire plant. You get a batch of fiber material out of one end and flour material out of the other. There's not a lot of loss inside there. There may be a very little bit, but at the end of the day, you're going to have really clean flour and really clean fiber. It's just a matter of what do you do with it from there. And you're going to get you're going to get some overlap here and there. You might have, some really nice fine flour get in your fiber bag, or there's going to be a few sticks of fiber that got through and they landed in the biomass, the good kind of quality biomass. That's going to happen a little bit here and there. It just requires some fine tuning and being used to working with the machine, working with the equipment, and then working with the plant, really.
Yeah, and you could take and learn that over a season or two, but this is all part about turning it and making it efficient for whatever you need to produce.
Yeah, and downstream especially, the guys that are doing the extraction really enjoy having biomass that's come through the BioMaster, for example. Not only is it separating out fiber and flour, but there's actually like a consistency component in that machine as well that says, hey, we're going to get all of your biomass to approximately the same, micron, super consistent with the output of this. So all the guys that are doing extraction downstream can suddenly start to fine tune their systems and their processes even more during their speeds, their temperatures, because there's not the fluctuation, there's not the variety of the biomass going in.
So it seems to me that when people you're working with the processor, the extractor at the end of a process, they're like, we'll totally take your processed hemp, just bring it to us.
Absolutely.
It's easy to work with.
Right. And some of them are even, rather than relying on a farmer to say have this separation equipment on site, they're actually just putting a BioMaster on the front end of their entire process. We're not even we'll take whatever variety of biomass you can produce, you can bring to us, as long as it's inside these specifications. And then we're just going to first pass everything coming in is going through the BioMaster, because all the downstream stuff just gets significantly easier to operate.
So whether or not they get it exactly from somebody that's used your machine, the extractor's got his own machine and he's like, doesn't matter, you just got to be within these parameters and boom, we'll run it. We're going to charge you for it, of course, but we'll still run it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it makes it, in the end, it makes it easier for them to get the most out of, because in growing extraction into the line, you want the highest yields all the way through, and so that you can get the top dollar for it. I mean, when it comes down to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about efficiency for the extractors, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Reid, I really appreciate you being on today. You brought some fascinating points. I really admire the industrial side you guys are taking to this, because I didn't mention this before, but Reid and I actually met at the MJ BizCon here in Las Vegas, and walking around that hall and seeing all the different products, especially on the hemp side, there were very few that I saw there that really took the industrial mindset, like, we're going to make this efficient and we're going to make this built for like what a farmer needs and what they need to produce long term. And so, I appreciate you and your company thinking about that, and taking your 30 years of knowledge is extremely helpful, because there's guys doing this that are just wing it in their inventors, which can come up with some great ideas, but
certainly can.
Taking it and turning it into a true industrial product is what I believe the industry really is lacking. I think it's slowing the growth of the hemp industry, especially when there are people across the pond in Europe that have been dealing with hemp for a while. For us as a country to get on top of things and get the ball, we've got to start thinking mass production. So thank you so much for being here today. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's your website? Where can they find you?
Yep. So our website is just hemp-processingsolutions.com. We go by HPS a lot, but hemp-processingsolutions.com is the website. And then really any of the social media channels, if you search for Hemp Processing Solutions, you'll find us there too.
Awesome. Well, I hope my audience enjoyed this interview as much as I did. There's a lot of great tidbits from it. So if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more, you can also reach out to me at plantproblem.com and leave your questions or comments there. Also, we love to hear reviews. Please take a few seconds of your time and love to hear what you guys' feedback is, what you guys want to hear more of. And if you're excited about a certain episode, let us know and I can dig deeper into that. So Reid, thanks so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing your guys' new products. I'd love to touch base when you guys start building something else.
Sounds great, Anthony. Had a lot of fun being here today.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.